So this panel, it's about career paths navigating your future. Obviously, all of them have had quite a bit of a past. So they're going to talk about it, share their experiences. I'll start with Neha. Neha has been in financial services since the last 15 years. She worked in banks, consulting firms, and fintech across US and APAC markets. She loves traveling and is a wine enthusiast. We've asked all the panelists to give a fun fact as part of their profile, so that's why she said, I think the wine enthusiast part is the fun fact part. Raghu Ramakrishnan, he does data products not IIT Madras, he does it for Microsoft. He just gave a fun fact, which is he's an NFL owner. So maybe he'll share which team he's got whole or part ownership. Schwark Satyavolu is a serial entrepreneur and inventor with 15 patents. Schwark co-founded the fintech companies Yodlee, taken public as YDLE, and then acquired by Investment, and Truaxis, acquired by MasterCard. He was also on the management team of LifeLock before its acquisition by Symantec. He then transitioned to investing. You didn't transform, Schwark. Transitioned to investing in venture capital with Trinity Ventures. So that's where he is now. Schwark, he brings his entrepreneurial and broad operational experience to investments in fintech, AI, and security startups. He has built 3 versions of home automation systems so far to automate his home and is working on a 4th. So that's a good fun fact. Arvind, you'll have to introduce yourself. But let me introduce Prasad, and then you can do it as part of the panel. Prasad Setty says, I've spent my career on helping people and organizations to grow and scale. I founded Google's people analytics team and helped shape Google's approach to hiring, developing, rewarding, and retaining talent. Now I share my knowledge as an advisor to companies like Grab, BetterUp, and Roblox, and as a lecturer at the Stanford GSB. When I was a student at IITM, I memorized pi to 1,000 decimals. And have 3.1415926535. See, this guy, what guys who wrote JEE do, right? But they got nothing better. So let's have Arvind say a little bit, and then Prasad take it from there.
This is Naren's way of saying I forgot to fill the form. So I started my career at Oracle, and then worked on the core database products. Got to start a new product there, which is a rare occurrence for Oracle, which later became Exadata. Took me 3 years to get the first version out. Figured out that if I were in a startup, I'd be in version 5 by now. So that's when I left Oracle. Worked at a few startups and got a chance to start my own, which is Rubrik, where I've been for the last 10 years, which recently went public. And my fun fact, I worked in the same company as Abraham Lincoln. One of my startups I worked with got acquired by Dun & Bradstreet, and apparently Abraham Lincoln's one of his first jobs was in the 1850s, going from town to town, collecting company records and sending it back to them, and he was part of Dun & Bradstreet. So.
Very cool. Great. Wonderful to spend this Saturday morning with fellow IITM alumni and this wonderful panel talking about careers. The chai was wonderful. The only thing that could have made it better in Saturday morning tradition is rava dosa, right? Luckily, PV didn't make us do any NCC drills this morning on Saturdays. But I'm really glad to be here and talk to these folks who have an amazing path. I'm meeting all of them for the first time. Their LinkedIn profiles already reveal so much richness, and we'll explore some of that. we'll certainly turn it over to the audience, to all of you, for questions soon as well. But I wanted to start off first with a question for each of the panelists, which is really what motivates them? They're all incredibly successful. What are their personal motivations that have formed where they are? And we'll get to know them a little better. And I think, PB, you said before that, to sort of like get to know them a little, we need to know their batch, branch, and hostel too. So we'll ask them to share that information as we go along. But maybe that question for all of you. What are your personal motivations, and has your idea of what you wanted in a successful career changed since you graduated from IIT? We'll start with you, Neha, and go down the lane.
Check. Okay. Thank you, Prasad. And thanks to Naren for actually organizing this. And this is wonderful to see everyone. This is my first time here, and I'm really glad that I made it. Personal aspiration. So I'm from True. Thank you for the reminder. So I'm a little early in the game. I'm 2006 batch Sharavati Civil Engineering. And I'm from a place called Cuttack in Orissa. So I grew up in a very low middle class family, and we used to have one room where 4 of us stayed, me, my brother, my mom, and my dad. That room had a bed, and it had 2 huge cupboards filled with Britannica encyclopedia from A to Z. So ever since I'm born, I have been just seeing big fat books, and I couldn't escape that aspiration. So that's my personal aspirations. That's where it started. I just couldn't escape that. But then yes, so like all of us, IIT was not something that that I was seeking to be, go into. It happened by chance, and ever since then it's been a journey. I got into engineering, did Schlumberger for a few years in the rig. Then I moved to banking, to financial services. And now I'm just getting started in the tech world, which is why I'm here. I literally feel I'm starting over again. So I love it. So I'm kind of, starting the journey, if I may say so. Yeah.
We're always in the middle of a journey and starting a new journey, right? Love it. Arvind?
Yeah, so my dad was actually an entrepreneur in the early 80s. In fact, one of the companies he tried to start was what you folks here might know as TaskRabbit or Urban Company in India. This is back in the 80s. People would call and try to get plumbers, electricians, so on. So I keep telling my dad, you're way ahead of your time. But then I used to see him struggling to raise capital from banks, raising from unscrupulous moneylenders at some points. Working from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day, including weekends. I told myself I never want to run a business. So when I graduated from IIT, my goal was to, I'll get a job. I never want to do a business. But I think over time, what I realized was that as I was working as an engineer in a large company and so on, I felt like I want to know how what I did impacted the overall business. And so I kept seeking out roles that would give me a little more exposure. And so I went from large companies to smaller companies to finally starting my own. That's kind of was my journey. 20 years ago, if you'd asked me whether I would be running be a founder of a company, I would have said no way in hell. But that's where I landed up.
And batch, branch, and...
1995, computer science, Godavari.
So, Saras, electrical engineering, 1983. And, IIT taught me I enjoyed learning on my own, partly because I bunked most of my classes and had to cram for the PDOs. Partly because back then there was no computer science and at the undergraduate level. And a lot of my computer science was just in my copious spare time because I bunked all my electrical engineering classes. I coded. And the CS faculty were very gracious. They gave me a chance to kibitz on the master's level classes, where most of the time I was clueless, right? I was missing background. But I enjoyed that environment of not knowing and dealing with not knowing. So that's what I've been doing for the 40 years since. For the first 20 years, I was an academic researcher, University of Wisconsin at Madison. The next 20 years, I've been clueless in industry, right? And it's actually been incredibly rewarding, right? When you go in accepting that you don't really know the answers, and that's okay. Whether it's an industrial context or an academic research context, the challenge of figuring things out, maybe having an impact in various ways, that's been a lot of fun. And that's basically what's kept me going.
96 Mac Godal. Nitro and I were at the same time at Godal. What's kept me going? I think, not to be too morbid, but the thing that's actually initially kind of motivated me is to kind of leave something in the world when I'm gone. Like that's kind of the biggest driver, if you may, of things that I've done. Professionally speaking, when I graduated college, I told myself I want to be the CEO of a public company. When I turned 40, I actually had an opportunity to do that, and I realized the 40-year-old me didn't actually want it, that the 20-year-old me did. So just something to think about.
I love hearing those stories about how our interests and aspirations change as we grow, learn, age. We change our perspectives. Thank you all for sharing. And by the way, I'm class of '92. Nanda, Kemi, I was a hostel away from PB at that time. The second question that I wanted to have for the panelists, and then we'll sort of probably have like just questions for a couple of them at a time. Is really that many of you have been on these non-linear paths. Raghu, you talked about moving from academia to industry. Neha, you've gone from civil engineering to financial services. Arvind, you said you didn't want to be an entrepreneur, but you ended up being a founder. Can you talk a little bit about these kinds of non-linear paths that might not seem evident when we start off on them? In hindsight, there's like a very clear story. I never expected that after graduating in chemie, coming to the US for a master's in chemie, that I would spend all of my career in HR, right? And I loved it. And so what is it about these nonlinear paths that you chose that made sense for you? And for people who are contemplating making some of these big shifts, hey, I want to be a VC, or I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to do something completely different from where I started off, what would your advice be based on your own experience?
Sure. So I can just share my own experience and how I've navigated through some of this. First thing is, I do believe one life is too less to do everything. And every 5 years I want to do something different. My husband's sitting there, he bears the brunt of it. Like when he settles down in a place, then I kind of shift him to another place. But like I think non-linear paths are not something that's for, it happened to me by chance. Like I did engineering, like I said, I came to IIT. If there was no IIT, I didn't have a backup plan, because at that point, my dad, who I used to take advice from for all of this, said, don't worry, if you don't get IIT, you will go to MIT. So, not having a backup plan and not actually applying for any other engineering college was not a good idea. So that happened by chance. So there was no plan B there. So going to Schlum was, again, it was, the highest paid at that point in time, and we needed the money, and I joined that. So a lot of the decisions were, I would say, a little bit of serendipity, like life pulling me. But by and large, I think I definitely was, I think if you're trying to do the nonlinear paths, immense grit, belief in yourself, and really that curiosity and that urge to keep, exploring new things. I think all of us have that. Like I said, like I'm like a couple of decades in financial services, and now I'm moving to the, I'm definitely wanting to do something different. I really loved what you said, that the 20-year-old me wanted to be a CEO, the 40-year-old doesn't, and so I have to think through that as well. But yeah, so a lot of the nonlinear stuff happened. I think some of it was deliberate, like now. Some of it was good timing, a lot of it was serendipity, but definitely having a very strong bent of mind, which I'm sure all of us do, and really being able to quickly recognize the opportunities when they are in front of you.
I love the notion of serendipity. I often thought of career development as attracting serendipity. How do you put yourself in a situation where you increase your surface area so that serendipity is something that is not just something that drops out of the sky, but you sort of attracted it. And that was the talk that I gave at the CLT many years ago at IIT. Arvind, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree on the serendipity part. I think as much as we like to be in control of we think we are in control of our destinies, we're not. And you never know what life will throw in front of you. So I think the only thing you can do is, wherever you are, you try to maximize the opportunity that you have. And that could mean you put in, you're focusing on that, trying to do the best you can. And eventually, I think yes, it's serendipitous, but then at the end of the day, when you're taking a nonlinear path, somebody has to take a chance on you. And that means that you have to establish trust. And that means, so you have to build a reputation for yourself that you can be trusted. And when you have that, I think people are willing to take the chance on you. It may work, may not work, but at least they're willing to take the chance. And it's a very noisy world out there. And I think if you build that trust and build that reputation of being trustworthy, I think people will take that shot.
So for me, the one thing I've always done is try to find something that keeps me engaged, energized. And I was at Madison for 20 years. I never thought I would leave. And then my interests in large-scale systems turned out that the fun stuff was going on in companies like Yahoo, Google. And Prabhakar recruited me to Yahoo. I came there, never went back, right? Then Yahoo wasn't doing so well. Satya recruited me to Microsoft. And this time, I did a few different things. But at the end of the day, I was optimizing for the same one thing. Find a place that can put me in the best place to do things that I was excited about, right? And could have an impact in a positive way. The best piece of advice I can share is something I got from Leroy Hood. How many of you know Lee Hood or have heard of him? He was one of the pioneers in gene sequencing, okay? He's the only guy I have personally met who's elected to all the national academies, engineering, medicine, science, okay? So I asked him, Lee, how do you do this? He said, well, I get easily bored. So I work in an area until I get bored. And usually it's about 7 years. And then I switch to something completely different, except I look for some adjacency. So when I go into a new area, partly I'm looking for people who can help me learn. But I need to bring something to the table. So I look for something where I can help them with something. And given that, you should just be willing to take a bit of a gamble, right? So for me, the glue has been data. Wherever I have been, at one point I worked on the theoretical side of data. At some point I made the decision to go fully into systems. That was a big change on one level, but the constant theme was it was all about aspects of data. I moved from academia to Yahoo. The common theme, I worked on Yahoo's data infrastructure, search infrastructure. Moved to Microsoft, I work on cloud data, right? But the spectrum of things I have had a chance to think about has been extremely broad in spite of this one common thing. So if you can find your golden braid, I'd say use that to parachute yourself into as many different environments as you can, because innovation happens at the intersection of existing disciplines that are themselves mature, right? And being in that can make you feel sometimes a little, I don't know everything. And if you're feeling that, you're probably in a good place. So.
I think people said serendipity a couple of times. I think that is kind of like the entire story of my career path. Is serendipity is the last time I actually looked for a job was when I graduated college, and everything that happened since happened to me rather because I tried to do something. There are two things that I think were important. One is the Bhagavad Gita says karmanya adhikaraste, right? It is like just do stuff for what it's worth, and oftentimes what you end up doing is you actually end up meeting a lot of people. That initial interaction may not, you might not think something will come out of it, but in almost all cases I ended up meeting people who then introduced me to other people. Something came out of that, and almost everything I've done in my career came out of those kinds of things. Meeting people who then introduced me to other people, mostly because, again, I think somebody mentioned trust, right? So it's just that you build that trust because of what you do with them. So you spend the time, energy, give it the best you've got, and then they then build trust with you. Then they use that trust to introduce you to other people that actually then might actually have something that you might want to do together. Those kinds of things have actually driven almost my entire life. And the only other thing I would say is don't be afraid to take risks. I left Microsoft in '98. Microsoft stock actually doubled and split that year. Like it was and it was one of the hardest companies in the country. I decided to leave and start a company with guys I had just met. I didn't know them very well. My mom actually told me she'd disown me if I actually left this job at Microsoft because, of course, in India she was very proud to tell everyone my son works for Microsoft. But I did that anyway, and it was one of the best things I did. At that time, it was actually quite nerve-wracking to take that kind of risk, but it's one of those things that I think paid off. So I think taking risks, and from that point on, I actually was trained to take more risks because of that. So I think taking risks oftentimes is a good way to explore what's possible as well.
Very neat. So many interesting threads to pull on. I'd love to invite any of you who have questions to line up or grab a mic from Narain. I'll just continue until I see some hands or volunteers coming up. Yeah, there's a timer. We have time. We have a bit of time, so we'll get your questions in. And before I see any hands raised, maybe I'll pull on some of the threads that I heard. Schwark, I'll start with you actually. What does it mean now that you've honed your sense of risk-taking? What does it mean in the sense of careers or aspirations? Like, so could you like sort of unpack that? Like, so how do you like build that? How do you build conviction? How do you think about what are all the possible avenues that you could go down, and then feel like there are risks that are worth taking?
So that's a good question. I think risk-taking, at least for me, is not mathematical, meaning I'm not actually assessing which risks are worth taking versus not in a very balanced way. What I am really doing is trying to figure out, I think somebody mentioned passions, like what is it that motivates you, what is it you want to do, right? You look at all the stuff that you want to do, and eventually you'll find some of these things are actually quite risky to do. And then you balance your level of passion with the level of risk that you're jumping into, right? And in a lot of cases, I'm sure it's something similar for you when you jumped out of academia to do something corporate. There is a certain amount of risk involved with switching that kind of thing. It's like one of the things I've found is like, I was doing an operating job for many, many years, and then somebody came to me and said, hey, do you want to do venture? And I know nothing about venture, and it's a very, very different kind of environment, very different kind of job. And so that's a very big risk to take. The question is, do I want to do it or not? And that was, again, based off of what is it that I really want to do? What motivates me? And is that pull greater than the risk that might be pulling me backwards? And if it is, I jump in, right? And so it's less thoughtful maybe as that maybe than what you were looking for. It's really more a balance of is this leap worth taking because of the passion you have?
Based on your passions, based on the people that you're connecting with, you just get a feel for whether that's the right thing to do or not. Any hands up there? Questions? Yes. Yeah, sure. We have one before you, and then we'll take your question next. Go ahead.
All right.
And
Hello.
if you want to state your batch, branch, and hostel while you ask a question, as well as if you want to direct the question to a particular panelist, let us know.
Hello? Okay. Hi, Sundar Mudupalli. I'm 1986 computer science batch and hostel, right?
Yeah.
Narmada. Okay, well, this is maybe a little unconventional. So I'm obviously just a few years I'm younger than Raghu. You know, I've lost a few of my classmates in the last few years. So the concept of career, and like probably most people my age around here, I don't, quote unquote, need to work, right? So the concept of a career takes on a different thing, and I'm just trying to explore what other people are thinking about. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be my age. I mean, some of you have already made probably plenty of money and don't need to be working if you don't want to, right? So that's what I'm just trying to understand. How do you navigate that? What are you kind of thinking about?
Prasad, before you take that, I just have an announcement. So we have 2 mics on 2 sides. If you're interested in asking a question, please walk those few steps to the mic. Keep your question to less than 30 seconds. Don't make comments. Comments are outside. Make a question so that they have something to answer.
Raghu, do you want to start off with that one?
You know, that's a great question, and I'll barely touch on it, I think. But for me, career has always been, you know, you walk in and do something with your life every day of your life for the rest of your life. The amount of time we spend at work dwarfs the amount of time we spend on virtually anything else, maybe other than our families. So I have intentionally optimized for one thing, having fun professionally, right? The moment I get jaded doing something, I go try to find something else, right? And so career for me means staying engaged. For most of us, I think we are in a very fortunate place where if we so choose, we can make the same choice. I mean, if you can't put enough food on the table, that's not a choice you have, right? So let's not be hypocritical. But all of us have reached escape velocity financially. We will always get jobs that allow us to combine our passions and make enough. Maybe not to get you a private yacht, but you know, they're overrated anyway, right?
Or at least an NFL team.
NFL team, yes, yes. So I have to tell you this. This is when I joined Microsoft. Steve Ballmer was trying to buy an NFL team with markedly little success. I own shares in the Green Bay Packers. These shares are good for papering your toilet. They allow you to attend the shareholders meeting, to call yourself an NFL owner. They don't get you into a game, okay? But that said, I'm an NFL owner. And I met Steve several times. Every single time, I had this line I wanted to unload on him, but never had the guts. Steve, don't give up. You too can be an NFL owner. So, anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, if we define careers through things like recognition, through things like growth in some position and so on, that's a different kettle of fish. But if you think about it as being able to do something that you feel good about, right? I taught. I felt incredibly good about the people I taught, right? I also kind of liked the research I did, but that was not so much the external impact. Anything it had there was out of my control. The people I walked in and taught and mentored, that was immediate feedback, right? The work I've done in companies, again, I hated the idea of leaving Yahoo because I was with people, a team I really thoroughly enjoyed, right? I mean, I spoke with Satya nearly 9 months before I agreed to move, and I agreed to move because we got a new CEO who was not very technically oriented, who had no technical vision for Yahoo, and I said that may be fine for Yahoo, but not for me. I left, right? So for me, career has always been being happy, doing something career-wise, professionally, day in, day out, that I wake up wanting to do, right? And if you guys are fortunate enough to find something like that, I'll say I would highly encourage you to do that, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Raghu. I love that question. I love that answer. I think of that often because that's the stage of life I find myself in. I think of myself as retired from jobs, not from work. Mahesh and Ashwin both talked about several ways that alumni can give back to IITM or to other alma maters. Or like, there's so many ways to contribute to the world. And I think of my defining purpose right now as twofold: amplifying other people's success and creating an abundance of time for myself. Time is like the biggest constraint rather than perhaps other things, which has changed from early on in life. And I was talking to Kumar about this early this morning, and he said he has his own Vision 2020, which I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I thought it was great. His Vision 2020 is he wants to work for the next 20 years, no more than 20 hours a week. And I love that for him. Yeah. Please, your question. There's a mic there. Yes.
I'm Venkat. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Venkat, Krishna Venkat Swami from Chicago. I came from Chicago to attend this meeting because Naren tempted me to. I'm glad I did. Appreciate your comments. I had one question. You know, it appears that a lot of you have gone beyond what you thought. Was it all? It's all due to happenstance. I mean, you did not plan on it, from what I gathered, right? Am I correct or? Yes. Okay. When you did a move that really paid off, was it all gut? You had some kind of intuition that led you there, or can you give some thought and share some thought on that? Yeah, please. Thanks.
I can give you an answer. Yeah, I think it's purely gut. I don't think you can, for some of these decisions you make, I don't think you can. I think similar to what Schwark said, I don't think you can mathematically analyze it as much as engineers we all want to do that. I think you're making what you think is a rational bet. Obviously, you have to convince yourself that A, you'll be happy doing it, to Raghu's point, and B, that you at least have a shot at achieving what you think you can achieve. But beyond that, I think it's pure gut. That's my take.
For me, it was people, right? I went to Wisconsin because it had a great database group. That was my area. I went to Yahoo because I knew people there, Prabhakar, Osama, a bunch of people there. It was the relationship. Similarly at Microsoft, I had lots of people I knew who worked there. I spoke a long time to the people who recruited me. Ultimately, it's gut, but conditioned by your trust in the people you're betting on, right? So, for me.
But if I may add one thing, is luck. I think when things work out, I think it's less my gut and a lot more my luck that plays a part.
And maybe I'll just add one last thing, is the concept of payoff is, I think, what you go in thinking is going to be the payoff, more often you have so many other things that pays off, and it goes in a tangential path sometimes. Like in my case, when I went to Singapore, so to set up the business for 17 markets, it was obviously, to stay close to family and a professional move. But what I kind of got back from there is like immense set of people and allies across 17 markets. So that was a payoff that I wasn't even kind of, thinking when I went in there, yeah.
Love those questions. Any other? We have time for a couple more questions. Yes, I see some.
I had one thing to say before. I forgot the ground rule. Kemi 79 Jamuna.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Pannak Sanketi, batch of 2003 MEC, Nanda. So I have a question about how has this affected your family lives? Like someone who's like a long-term career at Google. I know Prasad, all TJFs, but but I'm always kind of considering okay, has it been like a lot of hustle for you, and how has it affected your family life? And I always wonder about this as a dad of 2 kids.
Great question. Who would like to take? What does it mean for all the things that you don't see on LinkedIn, all the other aspects of your life?
Yeah. Okay. I started a company when I had a 1-year-old. I won't recommend it. And generally, when people ask me for startup advice, I say do it only if that's the only thing that will make you happy. I think it was true for me. The net result was, I think my wife bore a big brunt of it. I slept like 2 to 3 hours a day for a long time. I think there was one time when I was at work at 3 a.m. and two folks said, "You need to go home right now, and you need to text me once you get home because I want to make sure you make it home." Yeah. So it's pretty intense. It is pretty crazy. But then what I did try to do was make sure that I allocated some time to my family as much as I could. My wife will say not enough, but at the end of the day, I think I still have a great relationship with my family. Credit to them more than me, but I think it's about putting in that requisite amount of time that you need to. I think I lost touch with a lot of my friends. Some of my friends here would say I didn't see him for like a few years, but that's a price you got to pay.
I can add a woman's perspective here. I think one thing that hasn't changed from IT is the ratio of girls to boys or men to women in this forum. But I think at least from a woman's perspective, it's the single most thing that's important as you're kind of trying to balance your family life as well as your personal life. And I don't frankly believe that career should take off at the cost of family. I'm very clear about that, but I think it's, having a supportive spouse helps immensely. Like someone who doesn't really kind of question what you're doing, the number of hours, and understands the passion that you put in there. So very often, I come home or I'm holed up in my room for hours together, or I'm traveling or doing something, and I come home and I get the comment that, oh, she made a guest appearance here, which is kind of true, but I have a very, very, very supportive ecosystem. I have 1 kid, so that makes it easy. But that's also why I took a step back in my career, and I'm again starting a next phase. Yeah.
Very well said, Neha. That is the one thing in hindsight I would do differently, like you, Arvind. Especially when I was working towards tenure, working on my book, I used to sleep in my office quite often, right? And it was an intense period, and I missed a lot of my children growing up. And even to this day, I haven't filed taxes in, 40 years? I haven't signed a check in 40 years. Someone's doing all that. So luckily, my wife dealt with the life part of things. But I missed out on a lot of things, right? Luckily, like you said, they still talk to me. But the times that went by are gone. And anyone here who's going through that phase, grab it. Don't sacrifice that personal connection to your family, to the people you care about. Your job will always wait for you, right? I didn't have the maturity you had to recognize that at that moment in time. So.
Yeah, I think my wife actually calculated the number of hours I was working, and she calculated dollar per hour and said that a nanny is making more than you. Why don't you stop and take care of the kids?
Love it. Maybe we have time for one more question.
We'll take one question from there, one question from here, and wrap this.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. This is Srinivas Sripada, 2006 batch. So question is like just when you're making drastic changes in the career, right? I did that, like happy paying job, and Becton Dickinson was director there, moved to the startup. Like not at the same time, but I started consulting. Then now last 5 months, I'm working on a startup with some friends. What are the two things that comes to you when you make these drastic changes? Happy life to, some riskier decisions. What are the two things that you consider or want to consider or thought one should consider? Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Maybe Arvind and Schwark will hear your views on it. The early days, before you looked back and said, yes, Rubrik is now a public company, right? But that first 6 months or first 1 year, what were the things that you did that kept you going? I'm sure there were lots of testing moments.
No, I think Raghu said it. I think it boils down to the people you're working with, right? You are spending way more time doing this than even with your family. I think when I look back with the early days and the people I worked with, those are some of the most enjoyable times. I didn't sleep much, but otherwise, while I was awake, I had a wonderful time working with these people. And I think that's the key. At the end of the day, you're going to spend a lot of time with these people. You better be able to work with them well and have a good time doing it. Otherwise, it'll drive you crazy.
I think there's a couple of different things. One is I think you have to love the people you're working with, especially if you're jumping into a startup type environment. It's a necessary starting point. The variables that I had to deal with were manifold. My first company I started when I was 22 or 23. So I didn't have anything in my bank account. So it was very important. It was a big question whether this was even the right thing to do, whether it made any sense. So it, just paying the bills or just kind of being, viable. In that time, I even had a visa question. What do I need to do to even stay in the country? All kinds of things start to become issue. All existential questions, so to speak. So to me, it's not an easy decision. That's why I said you have to love what you're doing enough, or the people you're working with enough to do it in spite of all of that, rather than because of it, if you may.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Prasad. So we'll take two questions here. They're going to be both short. One is coming up first, and then we have one from somebody I've known since kindergarten, and then somebody who's really young who has a question about whatever he'll ask.
I'm a bit of an alien here since I'm from IIT Kharagpur, and so I hope you'll all forgive me. So in the spirit of things, I am IIT Kharagpur, 1979, naval architecture, and Azad Hall. It matters to any of you. But I was curious about a forum like this, which is about two things, which is doing things and giving back. And so my curiosity is, by the way, my connection to IIT Madras is I was a visiting professor there in 1993. My question is, in the spirit of giving back, do you see it as giving back while you're doing things in life, while your career progresses, or do you see giving back at the tail end of your career? You say, I've amassed enough money, amassed enough wisdom, and I give at the end of my career. So I'm curious about the perspectives that you have and maybe the perspectives of the audience as to how we should see life. When do we contribute for the things that we get? Thank you.
Anyone? Sure.
Yeah, I can chime in on it, at least the way I've seen it and I've done it. I think you give back in different ways at different points in your life. When I was younger, when I was an entrepreneur, I acted as a mentor to other people. If somebody sent me an email, even just last week, somebody sent me an email saying, hey, I'm IITM thing, I would take that time and spend the time with them. Because that's my way of giving back when I did not have what I'll call financial assets to do so. As I progressed through life and I could give back in other ways, my giving back kind of expanded in its profile in the ways I gave back. But I think it's something you can do the day you graduate if you really wanted to do so.
+1.
Right. Last question.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Neeraj. I'm from IIT Madras 2018 batch, biotechnology branch. My question relates more to, like, you mentioned about people, like how you made trust in certain people, and then like a bunch of factors that led to your success. I'm more concerned about like the upcoming, like the AI revolution, decentralized workforce and remote collaborations, which is slightly different, like, and is a trend emerging for the new generation, and then they are more and more like getting adopted in workplaces. So how much of, like, how do you see like that playing out a role when you think about risk taking and then kind of doing this career shifts, and then the whole notion of imposter syndrome and incompetence which might come across because the world is more open, and then the network effect might, I feel that might have less of an impact. So just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Your microphone wasn't clear. Just to paraphrase the question, his question is, we all talked about people, but in this era where there's a lot more collaboration that happens digitally and people are working remote and so on, how do you actually build those strong relationships? Anyone with strong views?
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, one of the many things that we certainly studied. This is certainly, obviously, something that we've all experienced. There's an explosion in terms of these kinds of collaboration technologies. And I think there are like simple things that every one of us can do. You know, you start off with getting to know people personally, every interaction. You want to like have connections in person whenever you can at forums like this or other things that your organization might create. And then you try and build community perhaps outside of work. When I talk to, for example, GitLab, they basically are one of the largest all remote organizations. They're still at like 1,000+ people or so, but they focus on folks that don't try to build as much relationships within work, and they instead like focus on their own individual communities that they're part of. And like, so I think that kind of social connection is obviously incredibly important for every one of us. You heard a lot about both the impact of strong ties, the people that we work with every single day, but also the weak ties that help us explore those kinds of intersectionality opportunities that you heard from Raghu and others. So trying to maintain that kind of proactive view towards building both your strong ties and your weak ties, whether you're interacting with them in person, digitally, that is something that we all need to pay a lot of attention to. Awesome. It was so nice, Arvind, Neha, Raghu, and Schwark, to hear your views, and thank you for sharing your stories, and hope you all had a good time listening to them. Thanks, Naren, for bringing us all together.
Thank you,
Thank
Naren.
you.
Can we give
Thanks,
them a
everyone.
nice big round of applause?